think we were like, what if like you write your agent and it's running on your laptop and then you walk away and if it needs help, it can just like send you a Slack message or send you a text message. And people were really excited about this. So I was like, okay, let's build this. And so I built like an MVP in 3 weeks. A week later, we like closed our first revenue. A couple of weeks later, we got into YC, and that was kind of what we built.
Welcome back to the Lobster Talks, where we have the most important conversations with the best YC founders. Today, we just had an amazing conversation about the future of AI coding. Is it just talking to an agent? Are we still going to be looking at code? That was by far my favorite part, but we got into so much more. So let's dive in. Dexter, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat and share a little bit of our story.
Let's get started. So let's start with an introduction of who you are, with what you started building when you went through YC, like the origin story.
Yeah, so I've been doing probably back-end systems for the last 10 years. I was in the Kubernetes world at a startup called Replicated for like 7 years. My background originally is in like physics and chaotic systems and like modeling, like computational physics. And then around, I think it was November 2023, I started a startup with a buddy of mine in the data space. We worked on that for a while. Did not go well. Turns out that the party in like tools for data teams, like it was really cool in like 2020, and that party is now over, especially with like the end of ZERP thing and all of that. So we ended up he ended up leaving the company, and I was kind of like looking for new ideas, and we were building this AI agent to basically like manage SQL warehouses, like go into your Snowflake and find unused tables or bad indexes. And we wanted to build an agent that could do more than just like make recommendations and like basically give engineers homework, be like, hey, you should fix this, you should change this, but actually like do the work. But the MVP was like, this agent is going to drop tables that haven't been used in 90 days. So okay, cool, that's great if AI can figure that out, but we kind of want a human in the loop for that. Yeah. And so we're building that, and then
that's where it came from. You want a human in the loop.
Yeah, exactly. So we were like, okay, cool. Like there's all these AI things that give you summaries and like ChatGPT and chat interfaces. And I'm like, I want agents that can actually do work. This was like kind of what was in vogue around like April, May, June of 2024, is like people were starting to want to build agents that didn't just use read tools to do research and write summaries and write blog posts, but I was like, I just wanted to go actually do the thing. And I just want to like approve it or deny it with feedback. And I wanted like agents that could reach out to me instead of me reaching out to the agent and be like pulling up a ChatGPT or a browser tab and say like, hey, this, and this.
That's so cool.
And so I kind of went to New York and went to a bunch of AI meetups, and I was just like, yeah, we're doing this SQL janitor thing, but like, I have this thing on the side. And like, I think we were like, what if like you write your agent and it's running on your laptop and then you walk away, and if it needs help, it can just like send you a Slack message or send you a text message. And people were really excited about this. So I was like, okay, let's build this. And so I built like an MVP in 3 weeks. A week later, we like closed our first revenue. A couple of weeks later, we got into YC, and that was kind of what we built in YC.
Wow.
Yeah.
Same co-founder?
So he ended up leaving around July for basic, Revi's fucking awesome. I love Revi. But there was just a little bit of like, I think it just wasn't going well. And when things don't go well, I'm like, cool, I want to work 90 hours a week. And like, that's not for everybody. And like very amicable. We're still in touch and stuff, but.
And so I actually wanted to dive into the whole YC story, but all of this is so fascinating. I want to have a little premise. And I also want to go back to at the ZERP era, it was great. And now the party's over. And like, why is that? So we'll table that in a second, hopefully. But you find yourself as a solo founder then with a great idea.
Yeah.
How do you, and today you're not a solo founder anymore. So how did you go about that?
Oh man. So I'm technically still a solo founder until Monday. I have a new co-founder starting Monday. Kyle's super dope. We're super excited to have him on board. But yeah, it was about a year working solo on stuff. So like all through YC, I was solo, and now I know why YC only like lets in the most cracked people as solo founders, because it's really, really hard to do everything yourself. And there were other teams in YC who were like, cool, yeah, like our CEO is doing all the fundraising meetings, and then our other two co-founders are continuing to build and support customers. And I was just like, cool, my calendar is like 12 hours a day for 2 weeks straight of investor meetings, and I just have to like spend the last hour of the day fixing whatever critical bugs are coming up now and then. There was nobody to like keep it going.
Were you specifically looking for a co-founder at that point, or did it just sort of land on your lap randomly, serendipitously?
I think I've always, like, I draw a lot of energy from collaborating with other people. And I think there's a lot to be said for, one, having someone who can match your energy and really drive in and kind of like, my buddy Vibobs puts it this way: is like there's an immense upside in having someone at the company who spends as much time thinking about the business as you do.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get that from somebody who is not a co-founder. You can have a founding engineer who's incredible, who works really, really hard, but they're not going to be thinking about the business all day like you are.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I want to, of course, get this show on the road and talk about what the YC experience and what you built. But just that's very interesting. Why do you think the party stopped on the tools for data engineers? I think it's sort of counterintuitive to me. I'm thinking, either there's a real need, and I think it's pretty obvious there is probably, and so then we should still be able to sell them stuff that they actually need and use, or it was a fake thing all along. It was sort of a trend, a fad, and then that's the reason. But I'm guessing data engineers need tools to work better with their data. So what changed in your opinion?
I mean, I still believe that, and like our take at Metalytics was like the reason why people undervalue the work of data teams was because they don't have any way to measure the impact of what those teams are doing. And those were the tools we were building, like Segment, but for your data warehouse. And so I think what happened, having talked to a lot of other founders and a couple investors during that time, was basically the TAM's not as big as we think it is. I think everyone sees like, oh, here's a new enterprise technology, and they saw what happened with cloud, and they saw what happened with Kubernetes, and they saw what happened with dev tools and Docker and all this stuff, and say, oh, this is the same, and people are pattern matching on this kind of stuff.
It is smaller, right?
It is a smaller TAM, and I think it's like a lot of data teams. If you're a data team building part of the product, then you're doing, it's like, you know, Spark and streaming and engineering, and like it's just good old product engineering. And I don't think, like, I was at a company called Sprout for the first 2 years of my career, and they had huge data. They were maintaining, like, I think probably like 15-20% of all of Facebook and Twitter data. They were just streaming it in and storing their own copy of it. So like, really, as far as like companies in the Midwest, they had like one of the strongest engineering cultures because they needed it, because they had really hard like scaling problems to solve. They had one of the first Hadoop clusters outside of like Silicon Valley back in the day. But then there's another type of data that I think, I've always been a metrics nerd, and I've always been on teams where it's like everyone is managing by vibes. And you don't actually know what's going on, and you don't have like KPIs, and like KPIs are overkill for a lot of teams. But I've always, at every team I'm on, I'm always the first one to bring in, like, back in the day it was like Graphite and Grafana. It's just like, hey, this is broken, like I'm gonna go download the code base and like download the database and go see what happened. I'm like, no, we have tools for this, like. And so you put in dashboards and you're like, oh, all the things are stalling at 2 a.m, everything just stops. And it's like, oh, because the overnight job is holding a transaction lock. And so like you have like a 3-hour gap where nothing can get inserted into the database. And that job keeps going longer and longer and longer. It's the very basic like throughput metrics. I don't know, did you ever like watch any of the talks that Coda Hale did back in like the 2000s? He just talks about like, if, as an engineer, it's our job to understand the business value of the things that we're shipping. And if there's a path in our code that impacts business value,
of course,
and something goes wrong with it, someone should get woken up about it. I mean, this is not rocket science, but back in the day, it was kind of like, and like there's still a lot of, I would get on a team and I'd be like, well, you don't know how often this thing is happening or how long it's taking, and if it gets slower. So, I mean, nowadays we have like Datadog and New Relic and like APMs and all this stuff, and like it's kind of like, you get it almost for free, but so I was like, okay, cool. Like this needs to happen for companies. When I was at Replicated, I spent 2 years as an engineer, and then I spent about 4 years doing go-to-market. So I was our first kind of like forward deployed engineer, working with our customers, fixing the docs, helping people on. But it was a very complicated like container. They built their own container orchestrator like before Kubernetes really took off, and then eventually it was like rebuild the whole company on top of Kubernetes. So exactly. So doing go-to-market team, I was just like, wait, there's all this engineering stuff that we need to have happening. Like, I need to understand, okay, what's our time to this and what's our time? And like big scaled go-to-market orgs have this kind of stuff. They have like close rates and they have instrumentation everywhere, but we didn't. And the way that we solved it at Replicated was like, we brought in a data team, we put everything in Snowflake, and we started building these dashboards and reports. But I was like, this is incredibly valuable, and I'm pretty sure most teams don't have this. So I became very obsessed with like data as a way to drive a business. Did
you ever think of building tools in this very specific space? Was this the inspiration for the first tools for like, is this how you got to that? Because you seem to be pretty right now you seem pretty passionate about the topic.
I think it's still really interesting. I've kind of like put it to the side, and I run a like 2-person company right now. So like we do just kind of run a lot of stuff by vibes, but I always have in the back of my head, like, how can we use metrics to just kind of understand what's happening? I do this in my personal life too. I have like one of those people who has that crazy spreadsheet that is like habit tracking for the last 4 years. And it's like, I don't know. It started as like a macro, like calorie nutrition tracker kind of thing. And it was just like, I want to know if at 4 p.m., if I'm hungry, am I hungry because I haven't eaten that much today? Or am I hungry because I'm bored? And it's like, same thing with your business. It's like, is sales not working well because this thing or that thing? And it's very easy. And like, I think there's a lot happening in like less technical parts of the org where again, everything just kind of runs on vibes. And I was always kind of like, can we do this better?
I remember this YC, I don't remember which one it is, but this YC company telling you, well, everyone is like, for public companies, sales increased. And that's, people just stop there. That's great. Sales increased. Wait, actually you want to sort of dig deeper and double click. Is it because they doubled the number of salespeople and they hired, so the cost went up? Or is it because they have a better conversion rate? And so with the same number of people now, and you have to, the data just, anyway. I want to ask you what you're tracking, but that's probably for another, because it seems you're tracking a lot of things. That's probably for another conversation, and then we're going to run out of time. So let's go back on track. So you said you pivot, and a week later you have revenue, and like 3 weeks later you're into YC.
Yeah.
Like, talk about that. That's crazy. That's insane. How'd you get revenue in a week? How'd you get into YC so quickly? It was the right time. You applied on a whim, or you were very serious about it?
Oh, I had applied 3 times. So we got it on the 3rd time. Yeah. If you're trying to apply to YC and you don't get in, I hear stories from people who do it like 7 times and they get in on the 8th time.
Yeah,
so like keep trying, like, and keep building your idea. And it was a totally different idea. And so I think, and it was like, we were building the dev tools for AI engineers. And that's like a really interesting thing. I actually think, we'll get into this later, but like horizontal AI dev tools is a really hard space to be in. And I'll talk about how I came to that conclusion. But we got into YC, and then it was like, okay, now we got to close some customers. Like the first customer was like someone I'd known for a while, and I was like, we're just going to solve your problems. The very much like when you're early in a startup, like do things that don't scale. And there's a buddy of mine who had built like this N8N pipeline to scrape the top post on ShowHN. He was building like a developer marketing consultancy kind of thing. And so he was like, where do developers go when they want to market their stuff? They post it on Hacker News. They post it on ShowHN. So it's like scrape all of those and then like try to research the person, basically like just try to look on their Hacker News profile and see if you could get their email, and then he would like send them a note or whatever. I think, and it was all N8N. And so I went in and I just like rewrote it in Crew AI and like put human in the loop in there. And so now rather than like he had rigged it to just send a Slack message for each post, and then he would go and do the research and try to figure out who they were and if he wanted to talk to them. And now it was like, cool, we found this person. Here's the email I'm going to send this person. And he would just hit approve, or he would say, no, skip this. Or he would say like, no, change it to be like this.
Very cool.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, instead of being proactive, he turned it into like a reactive workflow where the AI agent was proactive. I was like, this is super powerful. And I talked to lots of people, and everyone was like trying to build stuff like this.
Yeah. It sounds like a dream.
Yeah, it's great. Turns out it's really, really hard. And I think like part of what makes it hard was everybody was building AI in different ways.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned in 5 months of doing like a lot of customer discovery and just talking to people, how do you build this? What is your stack? What LLMs are you using? What does your product do? The way that I was like very lucky to get calls with a lot of like really successful Series A, Series B founders who were doing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of revenue, shipping like real AI apps, real AI agents to the enterprise. And those people don't build like the 99% of people in the world are building on AI. I think Swix put this in a tweet somewhere. Is like, yeah, the way the top 1% builds is completely different. And so I was
can you tell us how?
Yeah, so it was like it was kind of like, which AI frameworks are you using? Oh, we don't use frameworks. We just have like a bunch of little LLM calls for specific parts of our application. We don't do RAG, or we like do the brute force iteration sometimes. Some people did some vector retrieval. But at the end of the day, it was like I was building for this ecosystem because that's what like the AI news hype machine was telling me. And it was just like, cool, like have a Discord channel with 10,000 people in it and build tools that plug into this like framework, whether it's LangChain, LangGraph, Crew, Llama Index, all of these things were like very hot and everyone was building on them. And then you go talk to people building real software and making real money. I was like, there's not that many people using a lot of this stuff.
But I was going to ask you, is it I was going to say, if you're not building for 1%, but building for the 99%, you might argue it's a bigger market. But you're saying that those other people are just not making money. They can't afford or don't need, or, your solution, is that what it is? Because otherwise, why not build for the 99% who, use those tools that the exceptional founders don't use?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think part of it is like you want to sell to people who are making money because they can afford. They have hard problems. They're trying to scale. They have capacity constraints, and like
it's an easy sell. Like, I'm going to come in and solve your problem. Just give me a bunch of money.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, you look at something like Vercel, right? Like Vercel is like, okay, like Vercel is built for everybody, but it's not just built for the people who are kind of like, let me take this thing off the shelf and ship my toy website. It's also built for people who are shipping like really good production grade software, and the top 1% of engineers, like, they probably will still use Vercel in a lot of cases because it's like, cool, it does load balancing and edge caching and all this, like, and workers and all this kind of stuff that is like, yeah, we could build that, but why would we? Like, why wouldn't we focus on our product?
So then the next question is, why, like, is there a way to adapt to those 1%? Like, they don't use any frameworks. They don't, could you sort of, okay, we're going to adapt to you. We're going to build something that you can actually use. Was that possible, or was that too different every single time?
So by like January, I had gained a lot of conviction. I was like, cool, I want to build things for like the best engineers because like they're going to be leading. And in the future, I think more and more people are going to be building like this. And this is what came together to this kind of like silly little like manifesto thing that we published in April called 12 Factor Agents. And this was like, here's everything I learned, and here's a bunch of like composable patterns. You can use one, you can use two. Some of them work nicely together, but it's kind of like 12 different things you can do to build AI agents that like give you a lot of control and open the black box as far as like how do you build really high quality software that is like reliable and testable and measurable and like will likely help you build a product that you can actually deliver to customers. Like, you can build a dumb little chatbot and sell it for $20 a month to a handful of people, but if you want to go sell a 100K contract to an enterprise, it needs to be really, really good.
For sure.
This was what people were doing to make really good AI software.
And you don't, at the time, you don't see yourself fitting in there? There's no room for you?
So we adapted our stuff to work for those people, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like a little bit less of like, hey, like closed loop. We built it into like this reactive kind of system where you would send a request and then we would handle the fulfillment, kind of like PagerDuty style, right? You send us a request, we would go find the right human, escalate it through the chain, Slack, email, wherever they were, and then we would bring it back to your agent. But the thing is, like, you can't just have an agent sitting and polling in a loop the whole time. So you have to open the box. And so it was essentially this recipe for like, fire the thing off, close your process, wait for the webhook, start it back up. It became this like kind of complex like orchestration problem. And I think, how do I put this? I would come across two types of people. There were the people, I was like, I have this one really good puzzle piece, and it's the best version of this puzzle piece, and you probably don't want to build it yourself, so you should use mine. And there was certain people who were like, yeah, I don't want to build that, and I do want human in the loop, and I do want to build these AI agents that ping me in Slack and feel more like real coworkers than just I have 6 different browser tabs open for every like AI software that I buy, right? And those people often, there was a class of person who was like, yeah, I want your puzzle piece, but I also need the other 9 puzzle pieces. Like, I don't have an AI agent. I don't have a thing deployed to the cloud that can catch a webhook and do all this stuff and store the state in Redis or Mongo or SQL or wherever you're storing your threads and things like this. And then there was this other class of, so it was like, okay, cool, I want your thing, but like I'm not ready to plug it in because like, so that was 12 Factor Agents. So it was like 3 months of that. I was like, cool, people need a guide on how to do this. And then there was the other side of people who was like, yeah, I want your puzzle piece. I already have the other 9. And guess what? If I can build 9 puzzle pieces, I either already have like a janky version of it that we built ourselves, or I want to build it myself because like I want control. Like there was like, if you were skilled enough to wield HumanLayer, you were probably skilled enough to like hack the parts of it that you wanted for yourself.
And so those are clearly not your customers. On the part where they are missing the 9 others, isn't this a great opportunity for you to build everything else, or is it too complex?
So we started exploring that, and we worked with a couple design partners, and it just didn't feel like, it was basically we were doing custom software. And actually, I don't know, do you know Michael from WorkOS has this really interesting take about like how to take advantage of like how to build horizontal dev tools is it works best if you time it around the emergence of a standard.
Yeah.
And so you can build something like Auth0 or WorkOS, or because OIDC is coming out and suddenly they put SAML 2 into Active Directory, and now every enterprise is like, yep, SAML 2 is good enough, we're just going to use that. And suddenly you can say, hey, developers, don't implement SAML 2, we'll just do this layer for you. And the thing with Human in the Loop is there's still no consensus.
So you're too early, is what you're saying.
I think we were too early. We didn't time it right to do it. And so like the option was like, okay, build the standard, create a protocol, like hype that up and all that kind of stuff.
Why not?
By that point I had realized, well, that's a lot of work. And two, it was still, I think even then we were still too early. Like MCP is still figuring out their stuff, and it's almost a year old at this point. And I mean, at the end of the day, I found another thing that I have much higher conviction in, which I'm sure we'll get into.
We will right now. So I just want to ask you, just to confirm, have your opinion, but I'm pretty sure you're going to say yes. You said earlier, people were, speaking in the past tense, people were all building their AI very differently, but I think you would agree that it's still the case today. Like, we still don't have all of those sort of frameworks, all of those reflexes. It's still, from what I see from the new YC batch, etc., it's still so very different for everyone. We don't have the same, standards for human in the loop, but for so many other things, including for MCP. And so I guess, first, do you agree with that? And second, maybe it means you're glad you did move away from that, because you'd still be waiting today, wouldn't you?
I think so. And it's like, I think there are more and more like full stack like just do everything for you AI agent platforms. And I think some of them are really, really good. Some of the frameworks are getting really, really good. Like the stuff that they're doing with LangGraph to make it more like functionally, like the syntax is just, you don't have to design a graph anymore. You just write code and it works. And like the stuff that the Mostra guys are doing is really interesting. But I think your options are still sacrifice a lot of flexibility, hand over the keys to your control flow to something else, and then pray for the best, hope that the things continue, and hope that like if something goes wrong, you're able to eject out and reverse engineer the part that you need to actually change.
And if you need something else, you better pray they build it, because it's not going to be pluggable with something else. And so yeah,
and like the thing that you need to be able to do as an AI app builder, as someone making things in AI, is you need the thing that came out of context engineering that really popped off in June, and like Toby from Shopify and Andre Karpathy were all posting about this, is this idea of context engineering. And if you cannot engineer your context window, if you can't figure out how things are going into your context window, and you can't control them, then you're capped at quality, because all of the margin in AI, the ability to like find a hard problem that the model can kind of solve, that's like right at the boundary of the capabilities of what the model can do, and then get that right consistently, it comes down to your ability to, like, how much control do you have over what goes into every LLM call? Because LLM is just a stateless function, right? Tokens in, tokens out. I did call them in one slide pure functions. They're technically, I got roasted on YouTube for that one. Technically not pure functions, but stateless functions at least. And so that's the only thing that matters. And if you can't control that, and if you can't engineer that and build your tests around it and build your evals around each individual LLM call, then your job gets harder, and you're kind of like handicapped at the point where you actually are stuck with the same tools as everybody else, and there's no way to build margin in terms of quality and performance so that you can point to your thing and say like, hey, ours is better in these ways, because you kind of have the same handicaps as everybody else.
Okay. So you decide you're gonna drop this. Talk, when, how does that happen? What's your decision framework at that stage? Yeah, let's start with this.
It was a little more like pull than push. We kind of had started hacking around on a couple different side projects and ideas. We built this like Kubernetes-based like agent orchestrator platform that we were all really excited about, that we never ended up launching. It's on GitHub somewhere. And then we were building something where it's like drop in your MCP JSON, and you get back an email address, and then you can just forward emails to an agent that has access to all your MCP tools that we manage. It was like all kinds of like cool stuff that I was excited about.
There's a few YC companies doing exactly this,
Yeah. I actually just onboarded into Agent Mail last weekend. Those guys are doing cool stuff.
Yeah, they are.
Actually, if you were using HumanLayer and you want something else, I highly recommend looking at Asian Mail or A1 Base or one of those teams doing that. There are cool people who are still obsessed with that problem.
Very cool.
I found a thing I'm more excited about, which is like in doing some of these side projects. I think it was like there was this launch that Anthropic did at some point. I think it was around May, where it was like, okay, Claude 4, like Sonnet 4 and Opus 4 are out. They're like Claude Code's been out for a while, but it uses Sonnet 3.7, and I think everyone's on the same page. Sonnet 3.7 was a little bit of like a wonky model in terms of like getting it to do what people wanted, which was like write a lot of code in big code bases. But they also launched this thing called the Claude Code SDK. Yeah. And we started hacking on that. This would let you integrate the Claude Code like agent harness, the like tool calling and the file system access and the MCP stuff, and integrate this into other applications. And so we started messing with this, and we built a little experiment on the HumanLayer API where you can kind of like run Claude on your laptop in a loop, and every time it finishes, it'll send you a Slack message. And then you can respond and give it the next instruction. And they built this cool like MCP-based permissions integration. And so you can give it an MCP server where instead of asking the user on the command line, like, hey, do you want to run this tool or not? It would call the MCP server, and then you have full control over the experience of how do you ask a user for permission to do a thing. And so we wired that through, and it was very poorly documented at the time. We had to do a lot of like reverse engineering to figure out how it worked. But we started building these like things on top of Claude, and we built this like big Golang like daemon thing. It almost looked like Docker, and it had like a terminal UI, and you could have like a list of sessions. You could see the ones that were waiting for you and the ones that weren't. It was this thing like, okay, how do we build like a good experience around like parallelizing the use of Claude Code? And this was kind of the beginning of what is our like new product direction. But it also like forced us to learn. We like accidentally learned a thing that I think is incredibly powerful, and I'm like obsessed with this problem right now.
It's exciting.
Yeah. So since like 12-factor agents happened and the context engineering thing happened, and like AI engineer was like first week of June or whatever, there were two talks that I really, really liked. And one of them was Sean Grove from OpenAI had this talk. Do you see this one, like specs of the new code? So
I don't have time. I try to avoid, I should, though this is important.
I will send you two talks. When you're walking home or walking the dog or whatever, just put them on and listen. Yeah. They're worth it.
I'm overdue on a few of them, yeah.
Ironically, these are also the only two talks from AI Engineer. I haven't checked in a while, but the last time I checked, these were the two talks with more views than the 12-factor agents talk.
Okay.
Completely uncorrelated, I promise. They're just very good talks. But I was watching those, and I've watched them both a bunch. It was that one, and his take was basically like, we're all vibe coding wrong. The idea that you would sit down with a tool like V0 or Claude Code, and you would go back and forth, and like, oh no, change it this way, and no, it needs to be like this, and like vibe code your way to a thing, and then you would take the code and you would go commit that to the repo, and you would kind of like throw away the chat history. That the chat history was actually the really valuable thing, like the iterative act of specifying what it is that you want from your software is, and as coding agents get better, that spec is the valuable thing, because coding agents basically become spec compilers. They turn your spec into working code. And he compares this to like if 10 years ago you're writing Java or C or Go or whatever, and you spent 6 hours writing a bunch of code, and then you compiled it into a binary, and then you checked in the binary and you threw away the code.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
So that was a really interesting kind of like eye-opener. And like I don't think we're there yet, and I think we're kind of like...
But it's true, when you think about it, very first principle, the only set of data and information that the model gets is your inputs. So those inputs are the most important thing.
And this comes back to kind of like context engineering as well. It's like the model only knows what you tell it.
Yeah.
And the model can call tools and go read files and understand your code base and stuff, but like the model only knows what you tell it and what it can figure out for itself. The other talk, super dope, was Yegor gave a talk about the Stanford study. Do you see this one? It was like 100,000 developers. They just ingest, get data from like small startups all the way up to big enterprises. And they came away with a bunch of really interesting conclusions. The two that I really stuck with me was like, one, AI generated code leads to a lot of rework.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of other agent companies are measuring things like code-based churn, right? So you're shipping 40% more, but 20% of that 40% is you're going and reworking the slop that got shipped last week. So it's like kind of like not quite as productive as like the raw numbers would tell you.
Yeah, that's everyone has been sort of calling it out. Even headline saying it's actually now less productive to code with AI than without. So
so this is the other slide that I love from that talk is like, okay, for greenfield simple tasks, it's really, really good. And for complex tasks in greenfield things, like still not bad. For simple tasks in brownfield code bases, like, okay, depending on if it's a big code base and you can tell which file to go, it'd be like, okay, in this file, change the button text to blue or whatever it is. It's like, okay, yes, that'll work. But for complex tasks in brownfield code bases, it's either like doesn't help or it even slows you down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, so and do you think we get there at some point? Do you think we get to a point where, Claude code version 9 or something, 3 years from now?
Oh, I think you can have it today.
Okay.
This basically, like, this is what context engineering is about, is how do you use what you know about how LLMs work and controlling context windows to get the most out of today's models. So let me tell you a story. So we were working on this Claude Code multiplexer thing, and it was like thousands of lines of Go code. It looked kind of like Docker. It was like managing all these processes and streaming standard out. There's all these like race condition tests that we had to build and all this stuff. And I was working with one of the best, like most productive AI coders I've ever met. And they were shipping me probably every 2 days, it would be like 2,000 lines of Go code. And I just, at the start, I was like, cool, let me review this for style. Let me, like, I know I've been writing Go for 7 years. Like, okay, here's the right way to do this. And we should use this library for test assertions. And after like 2 or 3 of them, I was like, okay, I don't have time to do style updates on all of this. And I would commit it to our Claude MD. I would be like, okay, here's the Go style guidelines. That way I don't have to like review it every time. The next one would get better and better. And then eventually I was like, cool, I'll just read the integration test. And if the integration tests like look good to me, then I'll assume the code is good, right? And at a certain point, I was just like, I would get another PR and I would just say like, I hope you know I'm not, like at this point, like I'm gonna have to re-onboard to this code base as a new developer. I just couldn't review everything. Yeah. And so we were kind of forced to go figure out something else. Yeah. And so we like spent a lot of time, it took about 8 weeks, and we transformed internally as a company to basically not focus as much on the code. I still read the code, I still read the tests, but like there's a lot of stuff that happens upstream now in our process, and it all comes from context engineering, and it's this idea of, we just built a workflow that I think works really, really well with Claude Code, and now we're building products around how do we give that workflow to more people.
Okay. What do you call it?
Oh, I don't have, so the product is called, the working title right now is called HumanLayer.
Okay.
But the basic idea is like, you want to, like the dumbest way to use a coding agent is to just like chat back and forth with it until you get off track. Have you used like Claude Code? Are you vibe coding these days?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah? So you ever like your Claude Code is like working and you're like, no, you're wrong, do it that way, or whatever it is?
What everyone is doing. That's almost the only thing we're doing.
So a lot of people found this. Have you found this where it's like, okay, if it's too off track, I'm just gonna like throw it out and start over?
Start from scratch.
Start from fresh context. Because like, okay, whatever's in the context so far, like the trajectory is wrong, it's on the wrong path, and like I think actually what is happening is like it does a thing and you're like, no, that's wrong, do it this way. And then it does a different thing and you say, no, that's wrong, do it this way.
And then you're like,
the context window is basically like you are gaslighting, and it's not gaslighting, but you are few shot prompting the model into thinking that the next reasonable token in this conversation is for the model to make another mistake, and like it's waiting, it wants to be corrected by the human. It actually like, I think like the prompt trajectory is telling it like, anyways, we'll get into that whole thing. Yeah. But anyway, so you start over, if you get a lot of
that's why some people say you should do a commit at every message. So you can just have, but then it takes maybe it gets automated at some point. It just takes forever, and like, I'm gonna do this, commit, okay, now I'm gonna do the next message, commit, review it, okay, no, I need to go back to the here.
Yeah, you want to have kind of like checkpoints along the way, and like some people have actually built this. Claude Code doesn't do this, but I think Open Code does this, where it actually like snapshots your code base after every step, and so you can actually rewind not just the conversation state, but also rewind the code base state.
That's not too bad.
Yeah,
maybe that's one part of the solution, but there's probably more elegant ways.
Yeah. So the next thing people discover is this thing I call like intentional compaction, which is like whether you're on track or off track, you get kind of like the more context you use, the worse results you're going to get, like every single time. And so like the best AI engineers I know are all optimizing around like use as little of the context as possible, do like one incremental step, and then like update your status and then move on to the next thing. And then like fresh context window all the time. They're using clear all day.
And so is it a lot of prompt engineering ahead of time? Like I'm just going to try to one-shot this with the best prompt?
So yes, in a short way, yes, but the prompts are not written by humans.
Yeah, of course.
Prompts are written by AI. But even like being able to steer the model to create the prompt for the next
right
context.
prompt,
Let's say you get 50% context window usage, and then you're like, cool, like write down everything that we're doing, like all the files you've touched so far, and all these. Like Claude is a built-in compact. All these things have a built-in compact. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as you can create a markdown file by steering it to okay, here's what we're doing, here's the files we've touched, here's the next files we're going to do. Basically like freezing everything and compacting it in a way that you can review and you can edit it and you can change it, and then that becomes the input to the next context window, and you're onboarding the agent into the problem.
Yeah.
So we basically formalize this, and it's a 3-stage thing that we do, and I don't think these are the prompts we're going to be using in 6 months. I don't think it's going to be 3 stages in 6 months, but today this works really, really well. Is like, first you start with research. And research is all about like understanding the state of the code base. Like, how does it work? Where do things happen? Like, what is interesting and valuable to, like, relevant to solving whatever the problem is. So, hey, we're building this feature. Just find it. Do not tell me how to fix it. Do not tell me how to build it. Do not come up with opinions about what's good or bad. Just objective. How does this work today?
Just it, yeah.
That goes into like a 200-300 line markdown file. Then you do a plan. And then you say, cool, here's the thing we're building, here's the spec, whatever it is, here's everything you need to know about which files matter. And so that one can get straight to work. It doesn't have to search for the functionality. Like searching and listing and reading takes up so much of your context window. So if you can skip that, then the model can get straight to, oh, let me read those 12 files, and then I can build you a step-by-step plan on like the 10 changes I'm gonna make to implement this feature. And then we go to implementation.
Yeah.
And if the plan is good, I mean, you can imagine, use Cloud Code. If you gave it a list of like, make this change in this file, make this change in this file, make this change in this file, the implementation is probably going to go pretty well.
Yeah,
very few surprises. So there's surprises sometimes. But it's all about context engineering. It's all about, if you don't understand context windows and how they work, and like how LLM agent loops work, then you can't leverage this. And you have to review it. It's not magic.
Yeah. And so that's what you're building and selling right now. How I'm like, that's a problem everyone has. So I want to ask you, how's the selling going? I'm guessing great. But also probably there's some surprises, objections that you're encountering. What's the, where are you with this right now?
Yeah, so like I said, I don't believe, like our prompts are open source. I don't believe you can build a company on a prompt, so we just give them away. Since we kind of started talking about this publicly a couple weeks ago, there's been probably 100 people who have gone and like just taken our prompts from the repo and started using them. And like, I feel very strongly like these will not work for everyone. They need to be tuned for your code base. They need to be customized. Like you will get better performance, but you won't actually be able to like do some of the things that we've done. Is like I like to go into open source repos that I don't understand and be like, okay, here's a 300,000 line Rust code base. Let me see if I can grab it, take it off their GitHub, and just like one shot the fix. And like that, I had to tune my research and I had to tune my planning prompt, and then I had to go read the plan. Like you have to review this stuff. It's not magic, but what it gives you is more leverage, right? Because like a bad line of code is a bad line of code, and a bad part of a plan can be like 100 bad lines of code. And a bad line of research, like a misunderstanding
of what it is,
how the system works and like why and like where. You can imagine like you bring in a junior engineer and you're like, yeah, go fix this problem, and they pick the wrong repo to look in. There's just nothing's gonna. If they go back up to the understanding, get the right understanding, and then you can proceed to the plan. Then you can proceed.
So how do you build a business on top of this then?
So there's kind of like 2 parts. So we're building our IDE called CodeLayer. This is like a post-IDE IDE. What we've done is we've gone back to first principles. What is a really good user experience? What does the application look like that starts from managing multiple coding agents and managing coding agent sessions? And so we built sort of like superhuman for Claude Code. So cool. Like power user focus, hotkey focus, yeah.
And that's live?
That is in private beta.
Okay, that's awesome.
So we have a wait list up, and we're onboarding probably like 10, 20 people a week, and we've got a bunch of like trusted testers who are mostly YC founders, but a bunch of other just like really good engineers that I have been in touch with for a while. But again, like this is just part of it, right? And I can put generic prompts in there and give you like a research command and give you the workflow, but it won't work for your code base. And so what we're doing also with our design partners is like, the thing I've taken away the most from YC is like, don't try to build a horizontal dev tool that works for everybody unless you've been in the trenches with lots of people. Yeah. And so what we're doing with design partners is literally like, I'm gonna come and we'll sit in your office and we'll customize the tool and customize the work. I think there's 3 parts of this problem. Number one is how can I make one engineer productive in a legacy code base to be able to build big things. But if everybody on your team is doing that and you don't change the way you collaborate, you're hosed because you're spending all your time reviewing code. And so it's like, how do we change the process of like our team? We have 12 in progress statuses on our like Kanban board. We review the research, like we can do peer review, or if you're confident in it, you can proceed. But it's like a lot of times we review research and then we review the plan together, and that's much higher leverage than actually reviewing the code because the plan takes me on a journey in a way that like a bunch of just green files in GitHub just can never do, I think. So that's like, how do you collaborate as a team so that everyone stays on the same page? Because actually the mental alignment, the understanding how the system is changing and why is actually the hard problem here. Like you can take the prompts and you can start building, but if you don't have a plan for how you're gonna scale this across your team and keep everybody on the same page, you're going to create you're going to create slop because people are not going to have the like mental energy to actually review it and collaborate on it.
And it's taking developers out of code. It's basically you're going to work on plans, not codes anymore.
I haven't opened a non-markdown file in an editor. Like I still read a lot of code, and I read a lot of generated code, I read a lot of existing code, but like I haven't edited a file in an editor in like probably 2 months at this point.
Wow.
I'm just editing Markdown. A lot of times it's like iterating with Claude on a Markdown file.
Okay.
It's a weird future because I love coding and I love code quality and I love clean architecture. I love all this stuff.
Maybe this is what coding is in the future. It's not code. Well, think about it. Coding languages have been always taking you higher and higher and higher in the stack.
Yeah.
You used to, open and close your own memory, and now you don't do that anymore. The code does it for you. And so that's another layer of the stack. That's what maybe you're sort of almost inventing code of the future.
And I talked with Vibob about this we do like a weekly like webinar where we like live code AI engineering techniques and do a bunch of whiteboarding and stuff. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. It was like you have like machine code and assembly, right? Those were like the two generate. Assembly was like better than machine code because it wasn't just bytes. It was kind of human readable. And then you had like C, and eventually we got to Python, right? Exactly, where you're moving up the stack. I think now we're in like the next epic of like programming language paradigms, which is like, and we're still in the C era. All this stuff I'm talking about context engineering, like you're basically doing malloc on your context window. You have to be very mindful of like, okay, the system prompt is this much. I'm gonna use 20% for system prompt tools and like the input, whether it's a research and I'm building a plan or whether it's a plan I'm doing the implementation. And then I have 20% left to actually do the work. And so it's like, cool, if you put in less information, then you get 30% content. We try to keep it under 40% most times. If it's an easy task, you can maybe get away with 50 or 60, but like for hard work, it's like I try to keep it under 40. So if I get to 40% and then we're at a stopping point, go update the plan with what you did, and I'm gonna start again with the same plan. We're gonna move on to the next phase with a fresh context window. But this is all like the malloc age. This is the C era of
You shouldn't have to think about that. It should be
hopefully we probably won't
invisible,
someday.
Okay. Yeah. And so what's your take on this specific thing? Do you think code ends up being just English, just markdown files and not actual code? I mean, again, it will generate the code that you can review. Yeah. But you said you haven't written some actual code in 2 months. So do you think that's what coding is like for everyone in the future?
I mean, I think the code still really matters. And if you looked at our compacted files, it's like snippets of, you're still reading snippets of code. You're still editing snippets of code. They're just directional things of like, okay, after this line, add a migration that looks like this. And
so you don't see a future where code disappears from view and from being used by developers?
For now, no. Maybe someday. Maybe that's like Sean Grove's future. That's why he says specs are the new code. And as the coding agents get better, maybe that's the world. But like, if you want to ship good stuff today, you still have to. Someone else put this in a post. I forget who it was, but it was like you still have to download the code base into your head. Yeah. Basically, you still have to know where everything is and see it, because if you read the research and you can be like, oh no, that's not where that happens, or like we need to make sure that this part of the code base is also like explained in this research doc, otherwise the plan's gonna suck. Like, if you don't have that intuition, then it's not going to go well. So you still need to understand the system and how it works. We're still building code. It's just, how do you get agents to be productive in big complex code bases for big complex problems?
And how do you think about the fact that I'm sure it's crossed your mind that if this or a version of it becomes the standard, and it probably will if it's shipping better code of like, okay, let's not just tell it what to do, but let's first do a research step, then do a planning step, and then do an executing step. And that, again, maybe might change and vary, and maybe it's not 3, but 5 steps, whatever. But like, don't both the vibe coding tools, the cursors of the world, or even the LLMs themselves, the Claude code, make this, in like organic into whenever you're going to ask anything to Claude Code, it's going to already do those steps before answering you internally. And so they're sort of eating your lunch, and that's not what you want. You don't want to, there's this, at the beginning, everyone was like, oh, they're just GPT wrappers and OpenAI is going to start a new version, going to launch a new version, and those companies are going to disappear. And it turned out to be very wrong for many, but right for some others. And in this specific case, the answer was like, oh, we specialize. We're only going to be building for lawyers, and so OpenAI is not going to do just a lawyer tool.
The vertical thing is great. If you're building an AI and you can do a vertical thing and you can find a vertical that you're good in, that's freaking awesome. Because horizontal is really hard.
But for you, the code is a core part of their model and what they're building. So if they just say, okay, now, great idea, thank you, we're going to just do this for every prompt we get. And it goes back to what you said. You don't build a company on prompts.
Yeah.
So what happens then?
So I was talking about the 3 pillars, right? So you have like, how do we make one engineer more productive, able to ship in this code base? And then it's like, cool, how do we scale that to a team? How do we move the human effort up the leverage hierarchy to the things that matter more? And so like people who used to be developer productivity engineers and building CI/CD and scripts and build systems and things like this, I think those types of people are going to spend a lot of time building the core base prompts. Like there are people, it's like if you take our prompts for our repo and they're very special our repo, but then you go spend a day like changing them and making them specific to your repo and using them for a little while and tweaking them and vibing with them, like that is the highest leverage thing you can do, is give everyone on your team like really good like workflows and pipelines of how do we actually push code out. And then it's like, how do we move our review processes so that like we collaborate on research, we collaborate on plans, and we also do code review. It's like these new versions of, and maybe there's other things, like I said, it might not be 3 steps in 6 months. It might be 2, it might be 7. Who knows? But the third part is also like, how do you make your code base ready for AI? And there's a lot of stuff here in terms of like, well, if your tests take more than 2 minutes to run, then like Claude has to run them in the background. It becomes this whole thing. Like, how do you create agent friendly feedback loops? And context efficient feedback. A lot of people run their tests and it spews out a shit ton of code and like shit ton of output, and that's just not going to work. And so like what we've seen and what we help people do so far is like, okay, like it's really dumb small stuff, but doing this in all your repos for all your teams, and like it took us 8 weeks on a team of 3, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. Like it was like an existential crisis for me to like let go of reading all the code. Imagine on a team of 10 or a team of 100 or a team of 1,000 is like, yeah, you can kind of like amble your way towards the future, or you can do what I did, which was get dragged there kicking and screaming.
Wow, okay, crazy. Tell me what you're excited about in the next few weeks, months. What's coming? What are you've already like, you came a long way and did a lot of stuff. Is there more stuff you're excited to build? Is it just running with this for now? Tell me about the next few months. What are you excited about?
Yeah, so here's the future, right? Is like, I think coding agents are going to be a little bit commoditized. Yeah. We're all kind of using the same models, and like you can kind of revert. I mean, like there's a lot of really good, the functionality is converging. I do think some people are doing interesting stuff, like the Amazon editor is Kiro, and they have a bunch of spec-based planning and stuff. And then there is the Klein folks put this deep planning thing in that does do research and then plan. Like some of the like core like mechanics of this will probably get commoditized. I think the really hard part is how do you transform your culture and your team to a world where 99% of your code is written by AI, and I'm really excited to like see how that unfolds and solve problems in that
And this
world.
Is where you want to play. This is your playing field.
Yes. And then it's like, if you don't, I mean, the other thing is like people are figuring this out, and teams that don't figure this out are going to get lapped by the ones that do.
Left behind for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I have one more thing I'm really
Yes, please.
I've been there's a lot of people talking about this on Twitter for the last couple months, but basically using Claude Code for non-code things or like kind of non-code things. So like I use Claude to run the whole company. Our CRM is markdown files in a private repo. Every day I do like a daily ingest. I don't have a data pipeline anymore. I run a Claude script that basically like pulls in stuff from calendar, from linear, from email, and just like builds an entire like daily review doc. And then every week I take the daily review docs and we compact them into a weekly review, and every month I compact those into like our public update and our investor update, and just like building the brain for the company. And you're basically using Claude Code to do a lot of things that are not software engineering.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. That's kind of like a side project for now, but it's something that we're kind of continuing to hack on the side, because I think like eventually coding agents are going to become the everything agent.
Yeah.
And like I think people who are not very technical and haven't written a lot of code probably don't have access to that workflow, because part of making that work is like you have to have Claude build a script to scrape your Gmail, and like you have to know that it's right, and you have to debug that with the agent until it works. Once it works, you're good. So, but that's an interesting world that I think is going to become accessible to more and more people.
Yeah, I want this. I want Claude to run my firm.
We'll get you set up.
Yeah, awesome. Wow, okay, cool. Thank you so much for chatting with me this morning.
This was a blast.
I hope you had a blast. That was awesome. Just so excited to see the future and your place in it. You're building the future of AI code here in Silicon Valley. So thank you so much for having me. To our listeners, if you're still here, you should still be here because it's been fascinating. Please give us a subscription. If you're not yet subscribed, you can turn on the notification bell, a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. I also have a solo channel. You can type my name, Gabriel Jarrison, in the YouTube search bar. See you next week with another amazing YC founder. Thank you so much, Dexter.
Super dope. Thanks, y'all.